So I always thought that conversation and social skills, and by social skills, I don't mean my social skills or your social skills. I mean social skills like the proficiencies and skills in tabletop RPGs, like conversation, persuasion, streetwise, seduce, right? The personality skills, the bard skills, the faces skills, um, the confidence man skills. I'm talking about the mechanical skills in your TTRPG. And I always thought that those existed in this very interesting space. Um, right? You have things that are totally player skill, mapping a dungeon or thinking about where to poke and prod or stuff like that, right? That the dungeony exploration bits have a lot of player skill in them. Puzzle solving pieces are mostly player skill. You have parts that are absolutely character skill, assuming that you are playing a skill based game. Oh, pick that lock, and you have a 40% chance to pick it based on your skill level. Or even in old editions of D&D, you just had a percentage chance. Done. You're a first level thief. You have a 5% chance to do a thing or whatever. And that's your character skill, right? And conversation skills, social skills, the charisma-based skills often sit in this limbo between them because even though there's a mechanical element to, oh, well, you have the persuade skill, roll it. We also want the interaction to happen. We're not quite willing to give up that interaction between the PC and the NPC, typically before we make the roll. So, if you're gonna, oh well, we need to get past those guards to get in that gate to rescue our buddy. Well, then you walk up, oh, good evening, guards. Oh, it's such a good, right? And then you're talking to the guards. And then at some point, the GM goes, okay, make a roll. And you make the roll and you're in, or you fail and the guards boot you out. And that's all fine, right? That's perfectly fine. Like, of course, I want that interaction too. That's the whole point of the game. And we can talk about whether this is a weird double standard or not, but it doesn't. Those skills, you're always going to play them out a little bit, and you might have the mechanical piece, and sometimes you might not have the mechanical piece at all. You just might go, okay, yeah, sure, the guards let you pass, but it is in this limbo, and it is in this special place, and that does lead to a couple awkward situations, right? One would be exactly that. You talk to the guards. The person goes up, gives an amazing excuse, but then mins their persuade roll, right? Or fumbles through the worst possible excuse with, right? Oh, well, sir, we lost my kitten and we were just here in the prison looking for my cat, and then maxes the roll. And that leaves the GM in sort of the quandary of, well, how did that work? Or did that not work? Or why did you fail when your argument was so absolutely logically sound? And the other sort of awkward piece that I've had as a GM is, if you let your characters go and do their thing, right? Your players are out there and they go off script, or think of a roundabout to go do to get a thing done. Then sometimes they're talking to NPCs for which you don't really have a background. They might be a footnote on a note card in your GM notebook, or you may have just made them up on the fly. And now all of a sudden, the flower girl is critical to the success of the heist. But you don't know anything about this NPC. You don't know their disposition. You don't know sort of where they're at, or if they know the thing they need to know to help the PCs or whatnot. Let's pause it. Let's think about, okay, so the PCs are trying to get an audience with a local lord, and they've already struck out with the lord's retainer or the chancellor or whatever, but all of a sudden so the next day they're shopping, And just as a flavor bit, you go, oh yes, just last week I was having tea with my lord up there, and yeah, we're very close. And you didn't mean anything by it. You just said that as as added flavor, added color. And the PCs latch onto it, and they go, oh, well, it just so happens, Sir Merchant, that I need to go talk to the Lord, and since you know him, mayhap you could put in a good word for us, that kind of thing. And that's they take that angle. That's fine, right? You can make something up. But sometimes, as a GM, you'll get caught off guard by this, and you don't know enough about the merchant to actually have, oh, yes, he's actually first cousins with the Lord's, may or whatever. He's actually has nothing to do with the Lord. And he just says that to, you don't know. You have no idea whether this guy's an inveterate liar, whether he's actually disgraced nobility, whether or not, like, you don't have that in your head, or maybe he has a piece of information about the Lord that would be useful to get that audience, but you don't know what that information is. You didn't think about it beforehand. So you're left a little bit out in the cold, right? So those situations can be a little bit difficult and dicey, and quite often GMs will sort of flub that conversation. Well, I know that I did so many times in my gaming career, just sort of talk in vague terms because you really don't know what the hell the guy knows, or right, or backpedal, and so those are things which I always found awkward about the conversation, as both player skill and character skill sort of, it's easy enough if they go pick a random lock. If you go pick a random lock, it's a DL12 roll. And that's all fine and good. If they talk to a random NPC and want that random NPC to have an impact on the story, then there might be a lot more background in your head that you're now lacking. So one thing that I have mixed in with my repertoire for conversation skills especially is I invert the role. So instead of the PC talks for a while and the NPC talks and then you make a roll and then you figure out what's going on, what I tend to do in conversation rolls, especially ones that I wasn't already prepared for, is I roll the dice first. And that could be in public. A lot of our rolls are in public, but for those I might roll them in secret or make a quick roll ahead of time and just, okay. And I roughly, you categorize that roughly into success, marginal failure kind of thing. And then maybe you have super extremes for crit success and crit failure, that kind of thing. And when I break that into those rough categories, what that tells me as a GM is that when they approach the merchant for this favor, I know how hard to be on them or how easy to be on them, or do I need to make up some failure excuse, or do I need to, right? So for instance, let's say that they have a good success. Then the merchant's like, oh, well, yes, I'm going to go up next week and I would be happy to, plead your case for me. I'm a civic-minded man, and, you've been nothing but good customers. Let me help you out. Maybe a very marginal success is like a yes, but, right? Oh, well, of course I can do that, but, I would really love a discount. I would really love to get those gems for a little bit less than maybe you were thinking of selling them for originally. Or yes, I would love to help you with the book, but the Lord's all about civic service and helping your neighbor. And as it just so happens, I need some help with these trolls that have been blocking the road to the next town. And again, if you can make that kind of stuff up on the fly, you now have a good context for it. And I find that I have an easier time making something up on the fly if I know what the context of what I'm making up. Like if I know which direction it's going, right? So again, if I roll a marginal success on the conversation roll, I'm going to try to weasel something out of them with this merchant. And maybe this merchant is quite the wheeler dealer, and maybe he, right? And I'm all of a sudden I'm starting to think about, or maybe there's a situation that he has. But you see these bandits, I would love to help you, but I'm not going to get to the Lords this week. These bandits have taken a shipment of mine, and I need to really go deal with it. Now, again, the PCs are going to go, oh, what if we took care of the bandits for you, sir? And that way you'd be free to go have tea with the Lord and maybe mention our names in a good light. Bam! You not only does it look like you planned it, but now you have a separate side adventure real quick, and that could be super quick. It could be one encounter, it could be 2 or 3, or I do often keep random dungeon maps just sitting in a little folder that I just get off the internet, off of random dungeon generators. They don't have to make much sense. And there you go. You populate some rooms with bandits, and you have a nice little 5-6 room adventure. Boom, 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 done. It seems like you were prepared for this. They think they're clever for talking to the merchant, and it's a win-win all around. A great success. Bam, indeed. You just give it. You go, wow, oh my goodness. It seems like we have a common purpose. I was just heading up there this afternoon. Perhaps if you came back at 3, I would take you with as part of my retinue, and you can talk to the Lord yourself. Done. On a failure, again, he's reluctant. Right. You pound it out a little bit. You go, look, I would love to help you guys, but I don't want to. It would be foolish of me to abuse my It would be foolish of me to abuse my relationship with the Lord, on a bunch of strangers in town. And at that point, you can make a decision. You can leave it at that. And they failed the roll. Or if you wanted to make like a second roll, then that's where you make the roll, the visible roll, right? Like if you get a failure that's in that range where you're like, okay, this is still salvageable in your head. And again, that's sort of me. I think about, okay, they just failed it, or they failed by 2 or whatever. I'm going to say that is still salvageable. So he's going to give them I'm good, guys. I don't want to. And then they go, well, would 100 gold change your mind? And you've changed the situation. And then you go, okay, now roll persuade. So now they're making the visible roll. So everybody feels good about this. You had a guide of what to do with this this merchant and the request. They failed the roll, so you gave them a little bit. They now have a visible roll to make, and they bribed him. And again, it seems like this is a more planned interaction than it actually was, all because you made the conversation roll at the beginning as opposed to in the middle. Now, I'm not saying you can't. Of course, you could just have had them talk to them and then make the roll, and then, it's a failure, so he's reluctant. Right, that all works anyway. But I always felt that this way, for me, because I don't know how the conversation's going to go, I make the roll ahead of time, and now I know how the conversation ought to go. Well, you have good points, but have you ever thought that, I don't want to get in trouble with the Lord. The Lord, he trusts me. I'm not going to bring thieves into his home, right? So let's say it's a critical failure. Then what? Well, again, it depends. It depends on sort of how, you're going to have to improvise a little bit, right? This doesn't give you the encounter. So on crit fails or big fails or whatever, he might just be, silly, that's foolish, right? Or you might go, that's a big fail. That's a min. You min that. Why is he reluctant? Why is he not going to help you? And now all of a sudden I might be thinking, well, maybe he's working for the enemy. Maybe, right? Or maybe something else is going on which the PCs don't know. Much like I just made up the bandits thing. Maybe I go, yeah, he's working for the evil neighboring lord that you're working against, that you're trying to thwart his plans. And he goes, oh, well, why do you want to talk to the lord? And you go, well, the evil neighbor lord here is he has 1,000 men in the woods recruiting goblins, blah blah blah, whatever, right? And you go, oh my goodness, that sounds horrible. I tell you what, I will take that message directly to the Lord. Do not worry about it. Done. And then of course he doesn't, or whatever, right? Or he works against them, and he stonewalls them. And you can think of any number of things. We once did the persuade check, and I had rolled the persuade check, and he minned it. And so when they gave him the excuse, the guard was so helpful that he decided he needed to travel around with those characters that night and help them find their missing cat or whatever it was, right? Oh, don't worry, I'll help you find that. I'll come with you. And they're like, no. And then that throws them into the next thing, and the next thing is, how do we get rid of Jimmy the guard here now, who's decided to be a good Samaritan? He's so helpful, but now we need to trick him out. And that actually led to a different, right? That led to, another check or a seduce check. Oh, well, why don't we, or whatever, right? A carouse check. Let's get Jimmy into the bar and I will drink him under the table, and done. And again, I'm not saying there's nothing about the game, any of the games you have to change. I just find it as a GM super helpful to have the understanding of how the conversation's supposed to go ahead of time. Because it is harder for me as a GM to improvise conversations and speeches and so on than it is to improvise situations. So having a guide, I can easily think of a reason why the conversation goes poorly. It's hard to come up with the conversation without that, for me. So that is a personal, right? I don't even know, your mileage will obviously vary, and you might have way better ways of handling social skills in your game. But for me, inverting the role has helped so many times to make a fun situation out of what, turn something memorable and get it out of something which would probably be just a bogus, one-off, fumbling conversation in a role, which doesn't feel good. And it certainly doesn't feel good if they make a great point and fail, or a shitty, stammering conversation and succeed, and then you just go, well, we're going to go with the role. This makes it seem like you actually had a plan. And sometimes seeming like you have a plan is actually 90% of the battle. In fact, in GMing, it may be 90% of the battle is seeming like you had a plan. So that's it. That is my suggestion to you. Invert the roles on conversation skills to get that little leg up on the context and the direction of the conversation. And that helps you improvise the actual details of the conversation and can lead to some fun bits on those extremes, of course. So that's it. Thanks a lot. Thanks for listening to me, and I will talk to you all later.